I think the two that probably play the biggest role in non-adherence. Number one being buy-in. Now, buy-in is multifaceted. It's something that, you know, out the gate, I think you need to establish with the client. I mean, as the client, I think you need to have, and if you're not getting a huge, like massive surge in buy-in with a new program, I mean, like sure, like a week, okay, give it a little bit of time. I don't expect that to happen in the course of like 1 or 2 days, but I do want to say, like, the first week, second week, this is why I put people in the kind of deficits that I do. They're not extreme deficits, but they're more aggressive than someone who's like, hey, I still want to live my life. And like, you're definitely going to have to work for it. You're definitely going to have to be a little bit uncomfortable. And frankly, that is what fat loss is going to entail, especially if you're someone who is already low-ish body fat, especially if you're someone who has already found a lot of ease with achieving what they've achieved thus far from a physique standpoint. If you are seeking to get to a further point in fitness, let's just say a lower body fat percentage, a body fat percentage that you've never been to, this more than likely will require that you reach new levels of discomfort that you've never experienced before. Really, where I see the benefit of having someone go from, even if it is like, they're starting at 2000 calories going down to 1400, it's like, okay, that in itself is more than enough to put you in a position where you go to check in after 1 week of being on plan, you will see that weight has come off. Like, you are now easily in a 600 calorie deficit. And if you're aiming to lose 1 to 1.5 pounds per week, this in combination with a very mild amount of output, so structured cardio or step count, this in itself will make it to where when you go to check in, it's like, yeah, okay, like this was a little aggressive, but you are going to complete that week knowing like it happened exactly as you said it was going to. You lost a pound, pound and a half, whatever we agreed upon. That in itself should give you enough motivation to endure some of that discomfort that you're experiencing. Now, I think where adherence falls short is when initially, you go into a plan that, is there ever really any certainty that it's going to work until you execute it? I think for a lot of people, they assume that it's not going to work. I mean, most people that I speak with, they come to me, they're like, I've tried everything under the sun. I've tried different fad diets. I've tried carb cycling. I've tried meal plans. It doesn't work for me. So going into the plan, like, I expect buy-in to be low, but what makes it that much worse, what makes adherence dwindle very early on into a diet, is having that first week or two, you go in and you're like, okay, like I made a complete 180 with my habits, with my behaviors, and yet you go to do your check-in and nothing came off. And I know I'm speaking specifically about a fat loss phase, whereas like with build, quite the opposite is true, is that like we're not expecting a lot to change when you're trying to grow. That actually is a good thing, is like we're hoping that we don't see any kind of regression of the physique as we move food up, as we bring cardio down. Now, the second biggest thing that I think really deters adherence is the environment. And truly, I think like more often than not, the environmental factors, like these are absolutely things that are within your control, yet there is this fixed belief that you have no control, or you have very little control over the environment that you're in. So I think first and foremost, creating an environment that helps you execute on habits that bring you closer to your goal. And this doesn't have to be like the example I used earlier where it's like, oh, like, okay, I don't want to have this dessert or this cupcake or whatever because I want to get my pro card. I mean, that's a very big and very quick jump that client's making. This can be as simple as, hey, I don't want to indulge because I want to be on track today. I don't want to go to bed knowing that I was off track. And I think when you start to build those habits and really those patterns of thinking about, okay, if my environment is affected and there is something completely out of my control in the case of someone offering me a food, or there being a food that now I have access to that I didn't expect, this is a great opportunity to build those pathways, those mental pathways where you're like, yes, I could have this food. I have access to this food and it's very reasonable. And if I have a small amount, I don't think anyone would bat an eye. Yet I don't want to because of XYZ. I think that's where a lot of people tend to assume like, okay, I can't have this because I'm fat. I can't have this because I need to lose weight. And that And that, what are we talking about? That suffix of that statement really is very sad, but also is a deterrent for being adherent in the future because it's very negative. It's very built into this idea that I can't do something and insert some statement revolving around I'm not valuable enough or I don't deserve to do something. Whereas I think if we completely shift that perspective to no, I don't want to. Like I have like even just saying like I can't versus I don't want to, literally that in itself, like you're going from a restriction to now decision making, like agency in your decisions. This is something that I found to be paramount in my ability to completely shift how I view dieting, even how I view building. And when you think about it, it also opens up this door because I mean, like when you're talking about other people who are encouraging you, and I mean, like it doesn't come from a bad place. It's not like people are ever like, yeah, here, have this so you fuck off on your diet, so you gain weight, so you don't have a good check in this week. People don't do that. They're like, hey, enjoy this because it's delicious. Hey, have some of this. Hey, you should try this. I made this. Whatever. When people are encouraging you to indulge, it doesn't typically come from a negative place. And usually when you say I can't, it evokes this sense of like, oh, yes, you can. Like, you know, there's that compensation then from the other party that's like, well, of course you can. Like, you look great. And then there's justification and there's rationalization because, again, that person is typically trying to make you feel better. And this is absolutely going to be the case for some of you going home for the holidays right now. You're going to be in the like this exact setting where literally you are going to tell someone like, oh, I can't have any of that, or I'm okay, I don't want any of that. And they're going to take that as them needing to justify why you should have some of that. Now, if you take that framework or even like that phrase and you just say, no, that's okay, I don't want any. Not only are you communicating like, hey, like I appreciate it. Like, I mean, you're kind of saying that in a way, like respectfully declining. That's what you're turning that statement into, rather than essentially telling them like I'm not allowed to, as in it's not up to me, it's up to this other entity, whether that be my coach or in this case my diet. So another common one I get is specifically going out to dinner with your partners. So like, you know, maybe they're not on diet or they're, you know, in a phase of life where they're a little looser with their food reporting or not reporting food whatsoever. Okay, well, as much as I want to say, like, yeah, you should be able to go have the free meal, you can absolutely do that. But realistically, this is where a lot of people undo progress earlier in the week. So it's like you have to establish like that trade off. Having an untracked meal, having a cheat meal can be completely adherent and a part of your weekly plan. It's not to say you have to go completely without untracked meals throughout the entirety of your fat loss phase. I've done it this way. I've done it with the cheat meals every single week. I know what I prefer given the specific goal at hand. I can tell you in a contest prep, that isn't something that I really find practical for me because it does mess with my progress on a weekly basis. And frankly, I don't get to enjoy those meals nearly as much as I would otherwise. When we're talking about a fat loss phase where there's not a strict deadline and, you know, perhaps there's a little more flexibility with the amount of weight that I want to pull off. This is a time where it absolutely would make sense. And I would say it's even indicated to have that luxury to go out and even practice the skill of portion control and making decisions around food that are technically untracked. I think when you begin to really peel back the layers of what drives adherence, I think it can be a form of self-sabotage. I think it can be rooted in this belief that, well, this diet isn't going to work anyway, so it doesn't matter whether I'm on track or not. And I think that's a real disservice to yourself, especially if this is something that you've been struggling with your entire life. Every act that you take, every decision that you make is because you're getting something that you want, even in the cases where you're not acting. Now, if you can identify, okay, what is being non-adherent? What is that doing for me? What kind of relief is that providing? You can get closer to finding that intervention. You can get closer to finding essentially the underlying reason to why non-adherence is a persistent issue for you.